we're not talking about just intelligence. We're talking about reasoning, complexity, not really pattern recognition, but abstraction, creativity. In that, those are the hallmarks, in my opinion, of general intelligence. Of it's fascinating.
Hello, and welcome to Generation AI, where we demystify artificial intelligence in the world of higher education and beyond. My name is Ardis Kadiu. I'm your host, and with me today, I have my co-host and golf buddy, JC Bonilla. Hey, JC.
On brand. Everybody, I'm pointing at a cap that I've been trying to secure for ages, and finally, it's with me. I'm wearing the Element orange cap. Looks great on me. I'm just saying, I'm happy to be here. Yes, awesome time with you, with the company, with the leadership.
It looks good. The hats look good on you. The orange looks good on you.
I know.
Goes with your complexion.
I know. Apparently, I'm known as the chin. We got to talk about that. The Kaduis. We got to talk about that. Ardis, I discover something in me every time we socialize with people at work, but also in my personal life. It's called human hallucinations. When I eat at this stage, something happens at night, and it's just basically like heavy eating, a lot of drinking that you do with this type of leadership. So human hallucinations, my friend. 2 nights in a row with you. What's up with that? It's called age or what?
I don't know. I mean, I thought you ran it out in the morning.
I do run it out in the morning. I keep a healthy lifestyle, but something happens with the proportion of alcohol throughout time and heavy, delicious food that my body just basically 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, it's going to go in rounds of 2. And it's literally AI hallucinations become human. And it's combined with meat sweats. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about, right?
Yeah. No, it was it's called age. I'm coming around to that idea that we're getting old.
But not today.
Not today.
But today we're talking about the youth and or evolution or age. Actually, let's link this to age. We're talking about the maturity that AI is bringing to us. Isn't that the episode about aging gracefully in AI? Now you link the content to that comment.
Wow, I don't know if we can link it to that. What we're going to talk about today is this. We're going to talk about the new America's AI Action Plan that was unveiled this week. Actually, 2 days ago in Washington, and it's a 25-page document, but we're going to try to kind of summarize it and provide some insights around it and how it can potentially affect higher education, how it can affect kind of workforce and teaching and learning. But before we, that's the main part of our episode. But before we do that, over this last week as well, 2 things have happened. One of them is frontier models from both OpenAI and Gemini from Google, from DeepMind. So both OpenAI and DeepMind models have won the gold medal level, have done a gold medal level performance at the International Mathematical Olympiad, the IMO. And they solved 5 out of the 6 problems using pure mathematical reasoning. This is very, very important because it kind of signifies a huge jump from where they were last year and even earlier this year, where in 2024 it was silver and they only got about 28%, or actually there was specific models, but now these are general models. So it's very important because it kind of signifies the progress and how fast things are moving. And I would love to kind of talk a little bit more about, what that means, what this whole thing is all about. And then we can also jump into the main episode. But I figured this would have a correlation with education because
Of course.
I used to compete when I was a kid.
You were in the Albanian team?
No, but it was like between different schools. So we used to have this math. This was in we had math and physics. I think those are the 2 ones. So we had math and physics, and it was a lot of fun. But I love this competitions between different folks. But this is, if you remember ChatGPT, and I'm reading one of the books right now around OpenAI. But if you remember, or if you've kind of gotten a hold of it, if I think the challenge that Bill Gates gave OpenAI at the time was to essentially make these models pass the SAT and kind of the AP classes, AP biology classes at the time. And only when that happened, Bill Gates agreed to rubber stamp the approve a big Microsoft commitment to OpenAI, which basically saved them from going bankrupt and from essentially now having funding to kind of continue that research. So this idea of models, solving and kind of hitting benchmarks, it's nothing new, but this is a huge advancement forward in this model capabilities here.
And look, it's important that the correlation, as you mentioned, between planning roadmap. By the way, that was a connection to age. I thought you'll link it to retirement and how you plan and things like that. Anyway, you didn't go for debate, but so when we think about roadmap and planning as a country, right, you start getting these data points of today, right, of how these conversations that we'll have on infrastructure and how we think about governance, they're basically starting to be driving and accelerating these type of accelerators, this type of monumental breakthroughs on AGI like type of AI that is with us, right? And artists, just to paint the picture, mathematical competitions, these are usually pre-college. They have the international flair, as you mentioned, math, physics. What you'll see is on this one, a group of students representing a country. I think it's about 100 countries that usually compete. They get 2 days to solve if this is not prove a theorem type of thing, right? It's something that has been memorized. It's basically the type of mathematical deployment that requires reasoning, creativity, and the participants, right, are the gifted of the gifted of the gifted when it comes to mathematics, right? So it's really the who is who. It brings pride, honor, and the fact that technology won, right? It's, I guess, the conversation. So let's go deep into the mathematics Olympiads. I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. So the difference here is, JC, is that this problems require sustained multi-hour reasoning and human-style creative problem solving. So essentially, you get multiple hours to solve these problems, and it requires different thoughts, processes, and so on and so forth. So it's a whole new tier of cognitive challenge for AI, something that hasn't really seen before. And a lot of top minds, like they basically all thought that this was years away. And in reality, now this technology has kind of leapfrogged those predictions. And unlike older narrow AIs that were used to compete in these different Olympiads, these models use general purpose reinforcement learning to reason across those problems over these long periods. So it's the same type of models like O3 or reasoning models that we're seeing today, but these are some of the more advanced models that OpenAI has under their belt that probably are not going to be released to the public over the next few months. And same thing with Google DeepMind, but there are general purpose reinforcement learning models. And the thing that makes this even more interesting is that they're not using any external tools. So everything was learned via training or reinforcement learning. So there's no calculators in there. There's no Python. So just a model. And then it's also verified by, the results are verified by the actual IMO medalist, right? The International Mathematics Olympiad medalist.
Yeah, artists, let me just elaborate a bit of that, because as we speak about reinforced learning, this is some of the analogies that I give in class. You're not training on the answer. Like, here's how this will be solved. Therefore, reinforced learning is perfect for this because it trains on trial and error, right? The classical example is, as opposed to, hey, this is how you play chess. A computer will learn how chess is played by playing 100 million games, and the speed in which this happens. So all of a sudden, I realizes, well, this is how I won. This is how I lost. So the trial and error and reward—that's the key word. The reward is what these algorithms do, and they do it at a scale and a speed that all of a sudden it's perfect for this type of problem, right? That they would probably, go attempt something and they move forward, and they're also like, wow, they just got this achievement. So reinforced learning kind of works that way.
Yeah, yeah. And RL and reinforcement learning is how we're getting kind of the next progression in here. And the reason for why we think this is really important and what this signifies is we've talked a lot about AGI in the past. And really this is a real AGI signal, right? So OpenAI calls this they call it a phase shift because it's solving this Olympiad math with proofs that they're long considered a key to AGI milestone, meaning that if the models can work through proofs and generalized learning and basically solve these problems that the highest level humans or the smartest humans in the world can only solve. That's a really key milestone to this phase shift. Also, what's really interesting is that there's this additional kind of tests that are coming online that these models are now crushing, and they're getting a lot better than any human out there. So the ARC-AGI models, they where they kind of are able to adapt to kind of new rules, and then it's pushing us closer and closer to that true general intelligence or AGI that we talk about. So we're getting very close to that. So the one thing, around models and kind of what's coming, we've all been talking about GPT-5, and there's a whole lot of rumblings around GPT-5. And if you're so by the time this episode drops, we might have GPT-5
GPT-6.
out. But it's in Sam Altman and OpenAI team have been, there's a lot more details now that are coming online about GPT-5 and what that is and kind of what it means. If you remember, last year there was some rumblings, but they just didn't get the performance increase. So GPT-5 is right around the corner, and what we're hearing for folks that have been playing around with it, and there's a couple of pieces of information from the publication called The Information that they're getting some scoops, is that the models are really, really good, and they're very good. And essentially, the way that they're built is that it's a combination of the old model, like on all four, where it didn't have any thinking around it, so there's no reasoning to it. And it's a combination of the GPT plus the O series kind of being put together. So GPT-5, in essence, is going to is essentially built of multiple kind of models underneath that it decides based on your query or your questions how much thinking should it use versus should it give you an answer right away versus how much thinking. If you're a ChatGPT user like me, who uses O3 quite a lot, like O3 has been one of my preferred go-to models right now in ChatGPT. I just find it to be so much smarter. But the one thing that's a drawback is sometimes I want really good writing, and sometimes I don't want it to think through all these things. I just want it to kind of come up with the answers. It takes a lot of time. So with GPT-5, we're going to get both of those two things together, and it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of that. So I wanted to kind of mention that because that's going to be something that we might kind of come back over the next week or so as after we drop this episode, and keep an eye out for it for sure.
Yeah. So bottom line, and why we're speaking about this, right? This is just not a benchmark. AI is got the best GRE or LSAT scores that we've seen before. There's a breakthrough that happens here. Winning these mathematical Olympiads is not about solving the problem with the right answers. It's not a test per se. It's more about figuring out how to think. And that's a leap towards general intelligence because, yeah, we're not talking about just intelligence. We're talking about reasoning, complexity, not really pattern recognition, but abstraction, creativity. And those are the hallmarks, in my opinion, of general intelligence. So it's fascinating. And towards the connection of GPT-5, is your assumption that GPT-5 it's built with some of this machinery that we just saw these Olympians win, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'll be part of that. But obviously, these labs are working with models that are more capable, that are not going to be in the market for the next 6 months to 9 months and so right now we're probably, I don't know, maybe it might be GPT-6 or all 5 or whatever that won
That's the
this. But
episode after the next one. GPT-6.
Yeah.
All right. Now, connect this to the infrastructure bill, the AI playbook and roadmap that the government has launched.
Yeah. So in order to build all of these different models, it requires a lot of compute. And we talked about how Grok 4 was trained on 200,000 H100s GPUs, and all of those require tons and tons of power. It requires tons and tons of advanced chips, and it requires tons and tons of data, and so on and so forth. So this infrastructure build is really really important. So there's different layers in the AI world, right? Because if you think about AI as a fundamental technology that's going to be embedded in everything, you have the pure AI factory, the intelligence, which is the physical place where you have to have all these servers and all these GPUs and all this machinery. It requires a lot of power, a lot of water, a lot of and then the next layer up is requires these chips, right? And that's where NVIDIA comes in with the technology to make it more advanced, so to reduce the cost per tokens, to have more capabilities. Then we have the model layer, which that's where we've been talking about, like OpenAI and Meta and open source and closed source and all these different research labs. And then above that, you have the application layer, right? That's where companies like Element 451 come around, or other companies that are building applications on top of this. To the consumers, what matters is going to be the application layer, right? And of course, some of the model companies are building applications as well, like ChatGPT is an application. It's not necessarily the model itself. But what that means is now AI, because of the intelligence and because of the productivity gains and because it's becoming very, very strategic for all different countries. And US, we're seeing it as probably one of the most fundamental and the most important technologies out there that is going to affect our way of life going forward. And it's strategic in a lot of different ways. So this past week, Trump and the White House, Trump during, they kind of released what they called the AI action plan. And it really aims to basically secure America's lead in AI by doing a number of different things, right? Turbocharging kind of private innovation, talking about national infrastructure, talking about global influence on how our companies are able to compete, and basically become for NVIDIA to dominate the technology stacks and so on and so forth. And then it also pushes back on the this notions of DEI, and calls it woke AI and so on and so forth. So it's a technology roadmap. It's kind of geoeconomics, cultural strategy that they're trying to push together, and it kind of falls under three different. When we think about it, it falls under three different
Pillars.
kind of pillars that they have, right? So it emphasizes kind of US achieving dominance in AI development applications to drive economic growth, job creation, scientific advancement, national security. And the biggest thing is countering, what they consider to be the most adversarial country right now, which is China,
China.
right? So this plan really, it kind of focuses on things like deregulation, like we talked about private sector innovation, and we talked about infrastructure expansion. So if we think about the three different pillars, we have, number one, which is accelerate AI innovation, right? And, we can kind of go through an overarching, and then we dive a little bit deeper to kind of understand what they mean, individually.
Why don't you just basically give the 30 seconds high level view of the three pillars? Let me comment something, and then we can start basically double clicking in each of them. There's a lot to cover in this one, but yeah, cover the three pillars, I think.
Yeah, of course. So accelerating AI innovation. So this pillar kind of prioritizes private sector development. It essentially tries to remove barriers, promotes open source AI, and thinks about ensuring AI systems protect free speech and American values. So there's a lot of stuff kind of baked into that sentence. But if we need to build more data centers, or if we need to build more of these AI factories, it's going to give those permits a lot faster. It's going to try to remove as many barriers as possible. One of the big things that came out of this, or that there's some signal around it, is this uncertainty that we've talked before on kind of copyrighted, right? So it's like, if you want to build models, you want to make sure that you have all the training data, and you don't want to get into this war with like the New York Times and so on and so forth around training data and what's copyright and what's not. Yes, you have to fix that, but you're not, like, companies that are building models are not going to get sued to oblivion now. And that is one of the signals that the administration and this AI action plan does. It's actually provides some guidance to the courts or whatever to say, hey, this is a national security thing. We need to win in here. We can't hold this up because China is not respecting kind of copyright. We need to be able to put a framework in place. So the copyright issue kind of comes back to the table, but it signals that training models on copyrighted material is not necessarily going to be a showstopper, and it's an accelerant of that. So that's one example of it. When we talk about woke AI, or this idea of ideological things, it essentially, if you remember when we talked about like Black George Washington, that
Hmm.
Google tried to kind of steer these models across, like those are the things that they're trying to remove, right? It's like companies cannot necessarily, like, they have to be fair, and they can't bake in this kind of steerability around one partiality or another. But also the part that's really interesting here, it's trying to build, like, one of the big areas around this acceleration is investing in AI enabled science and manufacturing, building high quality data sets. I mean, this is amazing, because if we just talked about RL, it's like, how do you make this available to folks? Advancing AI interpretability and robustness. It's like, well, we need to understand this model. So like safety and all that stuff come into play in here. And then accelerating government and the Department of Defense AI use. So it has baked in there. It's like, we want to accelerate innovation by actually making the Department of Defense use AI. So you saw last week where the Department of Defense announced multiple contract awards to OpenAI, to Grok, and even Google. I think $200 million contracts to, I don't know if it was OpenAI, but definitely XAI with Grok, and also Anthropic. And the other part is, like, we talked about protecting innovation from theft, and then addressing this synthetic media and legal context. So there's a lot of things that go into play in putting guardrails and putting acceleration, and kind of creating the rules and removing the barriers in order for these things to kind of work correctly.
Awesome. So what we have is
Well, that
governments.
was that was just pillar number one,
Okay.
right?
All right. Well, let me elaborate on pillar number one, right? So what we have is at the macro, a tech policy articulation, and this is really really important because governments provide tech policy, but this tech policy, the way it's articulated, it's given us the geo-economical footprint for dominance, the cultural aspect. We spoke about woke, right? And then how it starts positioning for defense on the AI era, right? So, we see that already in pillar number one. Something that I love and it's fascinating is the articulation of how you accelerate innovation through regulation or deregulation of the private sector, right? There's something very clear here about whether we get into semiconductors or not. I mean, it's just that many of these things sometimes look at universities and the path to innovation to product consumer, it's lengthy. This is very put in the private sector front and center. I'm very sure there's going to be a ton of opportunities for more traditional research, academic to flourish, but there is private sector empowerment here. And What I know about innovation that comes from the private sector is its speed to time to value. It's really optimal. So in this acceleration articulation, the government is saying this needs to happen now. And for us to do all these things and weave all the things you just mentioned, right? Speed to dominance is relevant. And what can I tell you that is so native to the way AI has been built? Speed, right? So I like that this policy has that ingrained by looking at the role that private does and doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really true. I think one of the things that's really important here is in order for this acceleration to happen, there's a lot of components in there that represent opportunities for higher education or workforce in general as well, right? And maybe we should kind of try to switch to that. Like, what does that mean for colleges, universities, or even higher education? But it positions AI as a national priority for research, right? This is a really important thing. It talks about there's workforce development that's important in there that talks about that, and also the innovation. While not exclusively focused on academia, right? And like it kind of create pathways for universities to play this central role in the AI advancement. Whereas right now it's been a little bit unclear or how universities fit in, and they're trying to catch up with program development and trying to react to the industry on what's needed there. There's very key components in here, and then of course funding and programs that are going to be associated with that. So usually the funding will then come a little bit later, attached to different programs. So funding and literacy programs. So the plan directs the Treasury to issue guidance allowing AI literacy and skill development programs to qualify for federal funding, which this is probably one of the most important things that we can talk about, is that, again, if you're kind of upskilling your workforce, or if you're taking courses, or colleges or universities, they can write that off as part of their taxes, right? They're not being taxed, or they can write that stuff off now. So it's driving a lot of that stuff towards how do we upskill people the fastest, right? And universities can benefit tremendously from kind of creating curriculum for AI proficiency. So now all the workforce and all these companies, like, they need to upskill their employees and so on and so forth. So if you think about it, you might be able to see this expanding access to grants for AI education, but also for AI kind of education towards students, and an AI support. You're essentially thinking about it in both ways, right? It's like, how do you accelerate support and literacy with AI, building programs and so on and so forth. So STEM programs and promoting widespread AI integration in teaching as well. So it's not just how do we build more programs around AI, but also how do we incorporate AI in teaching? And those are both opportunities there. So when we talk about student success and when we talk about teaching and learning, that becomes a really, really fundamental thing.
Right. Quickly researching how much money we're talking about here, right? So from the NSF Tech Hubs program, we're looking at about 10 to $12 billion that have a strong pull towards AI skill upskilling and training. So incredible opportunity here. So universities, grant folk, look at this. My advice as you start looking at these type of proposals is remember what we just said, right? The speed to value, the time to value, it's fundamental. And I don't think that putting together master's programs is gonna cut it. It's just going to be these boot camp type of things that we could do really well in universities to basically start matching that. All right. I think that's pillar one. Do you want to keep on going, or should we touch on infrastructure?
Yeah, so I mean, let's just talk about, like, let's stick with the higher education component here and kind of what that means, right? There is the workforce training and research hubs. So basically, one of the things that it establishes is what they call workforce research hub to study AI's labor market effects and invest in skills training. So this is, again, super important. It really enables higher ed institutions to, when we talk about developing this specialized programs in AI infrastructure, cybersecurity, applications, all these different areas that are needed now to, for AI. So workforce research hub, which is really, really interesting. It's like, how do you take people's workforce and basically upskill them and have not just new graduates, but also current graduates. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. And they can, part of this is also universities could partner on building things like like infrastructure. It allows for those investments as well and those grants, because not only can these labs have the biggest data centers or the biggest AI factories, but universities and these research hubs need to kind of participate in the creation of AI as not as a distributed kind of way. This was really interesting because in one of my recent kind of road to AGI, and when I gave it Engage, this was actually one of the things that I talked about. I'm like, well, universities are going to effectively move towards a place where they're going to participate in the coaching and the AI, like the research part. So it seems like this is a natural progression for that. Obviously, building skills and participating, and also data sets as well, right? If you remember, we just talked about this idea of accelerating data sets, and universities have data sets are really important for the training of AI, and universities and colleges they have this history of the fundamental research that deals a lot with data sets that are that can be shared by a lot of people, right? So that's a really interesting area where funding is getting moved towards. And then AI enabled research in fields like medicine and science provides a lot of flexibility and perhaps a lot more funding towards those, even though a lot of folks are thinking, well, the NIH grants are going away and there's funding that's getting reduced over there. I don't know, AI research in all those different fields, targeting it by enabling those fields to kind of be accelerated via AI, I would say makes a lot of sense.
I mean, there's a shift on those type of funds, right? So those NIH type of funding are disappearing, right? But what we see with these new policies that they smell more like a shift, right? The dollar that was used to, I don't know, upscale or prepare someone on medical health type of things now is to how do you do that component with a gigantic twist of AI. Two comments on data set, and then one on coaching and the view of the school here. I want to remind everybody that one of the challenges we have in today is that these frontier labs have consumed all the internet. Like literally, they're done, and they're really trying to find partnerships and opportunities to get these models even better. When there is no opportunity to get them better, because sometimes what we saw is that the more you throw at them, the better they get, and they're like, what else is there, right? So there's been this play of let me create synthetic data to come and train and advance our models. So it's really exciting to think what that could look like. Why? If there's one advancement that I personally benefited from is when in machine learning, these universities started curating these training data sets. So I don't know if you remember the, how to run a classifier, what is called the typical Iris data set,
Mm-hmm.
the movies classifier. Those data sets were so uniform and gave half of the world who became a data scientist was trained against this and accelerated a very holistic approach of how to become a data scientist in machine learning. So excited to see what this looks like in the realm of AI, knowing that it's not the same construct that we know of a data set. So very, very exciting. Maybe that's a whole episode in itself. And last comment on coaching artists. I find that very reassuring that universities, in terms of thinking about what do I do, knowledge diffusion, right? But knowing that knowledge is contextualized and it could be interpreted and whatnot. So now I don't have to worry about teaching you how to code or how to do differential equations. But what does it mean to fail in a differential equation? How do you use this at work? And that switch to coaching and all other skills that are very important to be successful in today's marketplace. It's very, very exciting. I don't think many of the professors that we have think that way, or more or are prepared to do that. So probably what the second derivative of this would be the kind of coach slash faculty member that supports that in the university. So probably another episode.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So there's a few other things that are super important here in terms of kind of what this, some of the other areas. One of them is we talked about the workforce training for AI infrastructure, that essentially training for electricians and so on and so forth. So like that industry-driven training programs. But it also there's this early exposure to AI careers. So it expand the one of the goals is to expand early career exposure and pre-apprenticeship in AI, which really means exposure really early on in kind of STEM, aligning practical deployments of career-ready AI skills. It's this is kind of a no-brainer. The other one is promotion of open source AI, which basically says that open source models are essential for academic research. Something we've already known, but that's really, really important when, again, the academia and they're kind of working with these models and open source models and AI to think about, well, how does this translate to a societal changes and the research that we're doing on different sciences. Because when these models are closed, it's really difficult to do that. Whereas with they're open, you can do that a lot easier and have universities fit into that. The one thing that I found really interesting is AI curriculum in military education. So because that's the one thing that they can control, it's like senior military colleges. They see them as hubs of AI research and talent. I thought that was really, really interesting that they're pushing for. You know, it might be a really good kind of call to action for university presidents to now think about how can they transform their schools to become kind of magnets for people who are very driven towards, I want to see a career in AI and biology and AI and X, right? But those universities that are going to make that and bake it as part of their mission are going to become, what I mean, more and more vital to their survival. So in this case, military colleges are super important. I think we'll kind of leave it at that. There's a whole bunch of other things in here that are super, super important. But essentially, what this action plan puts in place is a roadmap and also a priority list for the different areas on how the US and America is competing in the world and winning AI on infrastructure, winning AI on at the model level and the innovation level, winning AI on the adoption level, and winning AI in the enablement level as well with our colleges and universities and training and skills. So they've thought about all those different areas, and I'm really, really kind of excited that there is a lot of thought leadership that's happening today around AI in Washington. It's not basically there's a lot of practitioners that are writing this stuff, and not necessarily people who have been there for a long time and don't really get AI. So they're looking at this from a kind of enablement perspective rather than a constraints.
Yeah, I in a highly systematized, no, big words to summarize what we just said, right? This AI action policy, it's technology for supremacy, right? And as a country, there's basically articulation that has happened. I like the simplicity that it brings on innovation, infrastructure, right? And kind of the governance aspect. I also want to link something that if you heard some of these conversations through the lens of higher education, all right, I know how to translate that into programming, into courses, because I have this tech vibe, right? But I'm a liberal arts school. I just think that to your earlier point of this is also attached with the thought leadership. I just think that the partner, the ecosystem to make this thrive, right? It just requires someone to own AI literacy, right? Reframe AI for human context, and partner with everything else that has to do with infrastructure and governance, that maybe you don't create the semiconductors, or you don't teach about semiconductor design per se, but these things require the AI awareness, the AI reframing. And again, if you think through the human context, I just find liberal arts schools to have an opportunity here. So for whatever it's worth, think about it through the lens of what does that mean to partner with this as a school. So that's my last framing on the higher education bit here.
Yeah, I think we're coming to the end. We can certainly wrap this thing up, but there's a lot of opportunity here
Yes.
for higher education to kind of lead this adoption and lead the upskilling and building of all of these different new jobs that are needed. So they just need to align with that and make sure that we're moving as fast as possible. There's going to be funding. There's going to be funding models that are going to come online. There's going to be grants around this. So if you try to get ahead of it to both on the operations side and try to bring it in for student support and teaching and learning, and also from building new programs, this is something that you should pay attention to,
Yeah.
and do a little bit more research on what it means in your state, what it means in your where those funding sources are coming through right now, because the incentives need to be there in order to move things forward.
Yeah. This is a natural moment in the evolution of AI that we comment on, right? Ernst, right? We often talk about how AI is evolving and how we're trying to translate to all of you, our listeners. But the part about today's episode is that as we watch these technical advancements, these rules that need this to thrive, whether it's in education or democracy, need to be rewritten. And today's episode, in a way, kind of gives us a peek into how this will be, whether you're a professor, a parent, technologist, it affects us all. And it's excited to start seeing that preview of what it's going to look like. So thanks for bringing that as a topic. And yeah, I'm all about ecosystems, and this is an ecosystem view on AI, what it needs to thrive, and as I said before, as a country, get us into that supreme dominance that we know is important on this tech place, if you will.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We'll keep you up to date and posted on new advancements, and we'll have a lot more to share this summer as the AI world is accelerating really fast, and we'll keep you up to date with all the news. But also, we will go deep into certain topics that give you a deeper understanding of how these things actually work and what they mean, and kind of what are the product that are getting built and what you should be paying attention to, both from an upskilling perspective, but also from an adoption as well.
You got it, Ardis.
Till next time. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.